Michael and I, our families go back a long way. You know, we have a lot of family history together. And my father was a teenager. He met Sonny, and he hung out with Sonny as a teenager. And he hung out with Sonny when he got out of prison. But he also hung out with Charlie Wagons, and he was also working for Charlie Wagons. But Sonny never put my father on record. But my father and Sonny were very good friends. My father could have went with Sonny or Charlie, but my father chose Charlie. He could have got straightened out with the Colombos, with Sonny's family, which was not the Colombos at the time, or Charlie's, but he liked Charlie, hung out with Charlie, he chose Charlie. Sonny tried to put a claim in on my father, but then he stopped because he liked my father. And then throughout the years, my father met my mother, and my mother, he was married to my mother, and Sonny was married Michael's mother, and they started going out together. They always hung out together. They were always great friends. My mother, was very good friends with Michael's mother, personal friends with her. I had met Michael a few times. I remember he came when I got out of prison in '80, in the very early '80s. He came to my father and Tony Lee had a gold store in Ozone Park. They were buying gold and silver there in an exchange. And he came there a few times to see Tony Lee. And I would, I met him in there and I talked to him, and he used to tell me, he had a club in Long Island, I believe at the time, and he told me to come there anytime I wanted. So whenever we ran across each other, we were very cordial, we were friendly, and it's funny because throughout the years, our paths crossed, like with, when we were protesting in front of the FBI building, when we were kids in the 70s, he's a year or two older than me, but we used to go every night. Every wise guy in New York would send buses to the federal building in Manhattan, and we would protest and scream, FBI, Gestapo, the FBI's doing to the Italians what Hitler did to the Jews, and we would hold up signs, and Mikey would have a bullhorn. He was like one of the leaders, Mikey, and the FBI would throw eggs at us out of the windows. It was crazy. I mean, it was like crazy. The Italian American League was wild. And I was only a kid. I was like a teenager. I just had started working with my father. But this is what happened. Moving forward, and it's really something I would one day hopefully be able to discuss with Mikey face to face. So the day of the main event, we were supposed to go to the big thing they were having. And I woke up that morning and I was excited. And I ran upstairs and to see if we were ready to leave. And I went upstairs and my father was sitting at the kitchen table. And I said, come on, let's go. We got to go to the rally. It was the big rally that day. And he looked at me, he goes, no, we're not going. And I didn't know why. I said, what do you mean we're not going? He goes, no, we're not going today. I says, what are you talking about? It's the rally. I said, this is the big rally. There's going to be tens of thousands of people there. I wanted to go. I said, what do you mean we're not going? And he looked at me and he goes, listen, I just told you we're not going. But I didn't understand that. I didn't know why, but we weren't going. That was it. We weren't going. So I didn't go. And later on that day, Joe Gallo got shot at the rally. And Michael was there. Michael was standing right behind Joe Gallo when it happened. The bottom line is Carlo Gambino probably had to okay that hit. So my father was in the Gambino family. My father knew it was coming down, and Michael's family, which was the Colombo family, they didn't know it was coming down. That's why I stood home and Michael went to the rally. Years later, my father did a lot of time with Sonny. They were in a lot of prisons together, and I would always see Sonny. And it's funny that you asked that question too, because actually the last time I saw Sonny Franzese was in Suffolk County. Him and I had the same parole officer. And I got out of prison in '04. I think he got out right after me at that point. And I walked and we were on supervised release, him and I, and we had the same officer. Me, him, and Lenny DiMaria, all three of us had the same officer, go figure, right? So I went up to report that day, and Sonny was sitting in the waiting room. So he saw me and he smiled, and I sat next to him, and he leaned over, because I was proposed at the time, and he leaned over and he told me, Jojo Carrazza, who was the consigliere of the Gambino family, he leaned over, because he was the underboss, Sonny, of the Colombos. He leaned over and he says, I had a really good conversation the other night with Jojo about you, about me, meaning, I said, oh, thanks. He goes, you're going to get that thing soon, meaning, I was going to get that thing. I was going to get straightened out. all of a sudden the door opens and one of the officers come running out and said, "You get on the other side of the room." They saw us talking on the camera and they didn't want us. Then they made me go sit on all the way on the other side. And Sonny goes, "All right, take it easy. You don't have to get excited." And I had to go sit on the other side of the room. And that was the last time I saw Sonny Franzese. Yeah. His path is a little different than mine. I'm not, I still, I practice the Catholic faith. I'm not ashamed to say it. I go to mass. I enjoy it. When I was in prison, I made friends with a priest called, that I used to meet him once a week and we would say the rosary. His name was Father Dean. He was in the Schuylkill chaplain. So my faith also led a part in my changing. I don't know, maybe not as much as Michael, but it did. And yeah, I know where Michael came from. Michael had the same upbringing as me. He was raised by, a killer, but Sonny was a loving father to Michael, and my father was a loving father to me. But, they were gangsters. Sonny was a famous gangster that knew, just like my father was a famous gangster. And we were raised in that household. And, and my father's a lot like Sonny. He wouldn't take responsibility for the damage he did to his family. Like I just saw an interview with Michael and Sonny, Michael said, he wouldn't take responsibility for the damage he did to the family, and my father wouldn't either. My father was an egomaniac. It was all about him. So I could identify a lot with Michael, a lot, and I know where he came from, and I know what it took to get to where he is today, to change it, to give that life up. Listen, my whole adult life, all I wanted to be was a wise guy. You know what I mean? Like, when I made that call, that was the hardest thing I ever did, to get away from that life. And I know that probably was the hardest thing Michael ever did, to get out of that life. No matter which way he got out or no matter which way I got out, we both got out. And our fathers had big grips on us. Our fathers, I wanted to be him, and I'm sure Michael feels the same way. So Michael made a lot more money than me. So I know it was hard for him to give that up. He made a lot more money than me. God bless him. You know what I mean? God bless him. I mean, don't get me wrong. I made a lot of money too. My father made a ton of money and I made a ton of money, but, we spent it as fast as we got it, because when you live in that lifestyle, money, you think it's never going to come to an end. But I identify a lot with Michael.